Hello everyone and welcome to this video on Fusion 360. In this video we're going to look at the interface for the design workspace and some of the ways in which you can customize that to better suit your needs. So when you first open Fusion 360, this is the view that you will be given. So we're in the design workspace, which we can tell because the button in the top left corner says design, and we are in a new untitled component, which we can tell by the title of this particular tab. Now, in order to best demonstrate what I'm going to talk about in this video, I need some geometry, I need a component. Now I could start modeling that by creating some sketches and some extrudes in this particular, in this new design, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to open an existing component. So I do that by going to the data panel on the top left corner and then double clicking on the design that I wish to open. I'm finished with the data panel now, so I can close it. Now if I had wanted to create a new design or multiple new designs, I can do that by pressing the new design icon, which gives me a new tab, a new untitled component, and I can do that as many times as I need in order to create all of my different designs. Alternatively, I can go to the file button and I can click new design. But for now, let's go back to this block component that I've opened. Now the first thing I want to talk about is the browser. So the browser is located in the top left of the window. If you don't see this for any reason, it might be minimized, so you might see something like this and you need to press the little fast forward icon in order to open up the browser. It would be my suggestion to make sure that you leave the browser visible at all times, because it is very useful. So the browser contains various subfolders which contain the aspects of the design which we are creating. So if we want to look at what the contents of any of these particular folders, we can press the triangle icon next to them, and that gives us a full list of everything that's inside that folder. So I'm just going to open those up now. The first folder or area is document settings. So here we can change the units for the component by hovering over units and then pressing the edit button which appears next to it. This component is in millimeters, and that's because I have my default units set to millimeters. So when I've started modeling a new component, it's already been in millimeters, so I can change it here. You can also change your preferences to change the units for all new designs that you create, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. The next area we have is named views. So by default, Fusion has given me some default named views, which if I click on, will orientate the component in that way. And I can also add new named views to this area if I wish. The next area is the origin geometry. So these are the origin axes and the origin planes, which are included within all new designs in Fusion 360. The next area is bodies. The bodies folder contains all bodies of material which are present within my design. So in this particular design I have only one body of material, and I can see that it's this bit of material here because it turns blue when I click on the name of the body. And finally I have sketches. So within the sketches folder I have all of the sketches that I've used to create this particular component. Now the browser is very useful because it allows us to control visibility of the aspects of our design. So I can either turn these aspects on at the folder level. So if I want to turn on all of the origin geometry, I can click the eye icon next to the origin and it will turn all of those on. If I want to leave all of the origin geometry on, but let's say I don't want the XY plane to be displayed, I can click the icon next to the XY plane. So I've got quite a lot of control over what I can show and what I don't want to be visible. One thing I'd like to draw your attention to is sketches. So you can see that in the sketches folder, I have none of my sketches visible. Now the default behavior for Fusion 360 is that once I have used a sketch to create a piece of 3D geometry, it is automatically hidden within this sketch folder. So if you create a sketch that's quite complex and you want to use it for a couple of different extrude features or something like that, you might need to go into the browser and make that sketch visible in order to be able to use it again for future 3D features. The next area of the interface I'd like to show you is the timeline. So you can find the timeline running along the bottom of the Fusion 360 window, and the timeline is a visual representation of all of the features we've created during the modeling of this component in the order in which they were created. So you can see here that I've created a sketch, which is this square sketch. I've then created an extrude feature to create this block of material. I've then created another sketch followed by another extrude and another sketch followed by another extrude. Finally, I've made a fillet feature in order to round all of the corners. Now the timeline is very useful because it allows us to, or we have the ability to go back in time. So we can grab the cursor icon and we can go back in our design before we've created certain features. We can potentially add new features here and then go back forwards in time. And it gives us a lot of control over how features interact with one another. We do of course need to be very careful when we do this, because it is possible to make edits within the timeline, which mean that we cause features further along the timeline to fail. So if we remove some geometry which is referenced later on, we'll cause lots of issues, and what you'll find is lots of red and yellow icons down here saying, look, there's a problem, you need to fix this. So while this is very powerful, we need to be quite careful. We can of course also edit any of these features at any time. So if we right click on this extrude feature here, I can right click on it and go to edit feature, and that will bring up the in this case the extrude dialog box, which gives me all of the same options that I had when I first created that extrude feature. So if I want to change the height of that particular extrude, I can do so and my component will update. The next area is the comments box. Unless you are collaborating on Fusion 360 designs, it's unlikely that you're going to make much use of this. If, however, you're involved in a large team project, there are multiple people working on designs at once, you might want to add comments here. So you can type your comments, add them to the design, and that just lets other people working on the design see what your comments are and potentially take those into consideration. So the next area I wanted to talk about is the toolbar at the top of the design workspace. So you'll see that we've got quite a few different areas on this toolbar. So the first one is the tabs along the top. So we've got the solid, the surface, the sheet metal, and the tool tab. Okay, so this is the top level organization for the different tools that we have within the design workspace. In the solid tab, these are all the tools that we use to create solid geometry. And within that tab we have two main areas. We have create, which allows us to create new forms such as extrude, revolve, sweep, loft, and we have modify, which is generally used to modify existing geometry. So things such as adding fillets or rounds, adding chamfers, shelling a component. This is located in this particular area. Moving on, we have the surface tab. So surface modeling is used to create geometry which has no or has zero volumes. These are fully two-dimensional surfaces. They have no volume. We tend to use surface modeling when we're creating quite complex components and we want to build up a component a surface at a time, and then right at the end of the modeling process merge all of those surfaces together and create our final component. The sheet metal tab contains all of the tools that we need to use when creating sheet metal components. So if we're going to make something which is cut perhaps on a laser cutter and then bent into shape, these are the best tools to be using. Again, we have the create area and the modify area, and then finally we have the tools tab. This is where we can conduct some quite advanced analysis. So we can look at, let's say that we want to inspect the draft of our component, or we want to do an analysis for where we can access a particular area with a particular machine tool. We can do that here. We can also run scripts and add-ins, which Fusion allows you to program yourself and perhaps perform additional functionality using the Fusion 360 API. So if we go back to the solid tab, the final thing I'd like to say for this particular area is that it is fully customizable. So by default you will have some tools within the top level on the create and the modify bars. You can change these whenever you want, and that will follow you over with your account to wherever you log into Fusion 360. So these preferences are locked to your account, not to that particular software installation. So let's say you are doing a lot of modeling which requires you to make a lot of holes. Actually, let's pick a different example. Let's say you are doing a lot of modeling which requires lofts. Rather than going to the create drop down and then picking loft every time, you can put the loft button right on the top level. So if you highlight or hover over loft, press the three dots menu icon and then tick pin to toolbar, that will put the loft icon up here. And of course you can do that in any section of a Fusion 360 interface if you want to get the tools that you use the most accessible to you. The next area is the environment controls, which you'll find at the bottom of the modeling environment. So we have a couple of quick access tools for orbit. So if you want to turn our cursor into an orbit tool, we can click on that one. If you want to look at a particular face, we can hit the look at tool and press that face, and it will orientate the component to look directly at that face. We have the pan tool, which will allow us to pan the component around. We have zoom tools, which allow us to zoom in and out on the component. Or zoom to a particular area. We also have quite a lot of control over the display settings and the way in which this environment is shown to us. So we have, let's say we're modeling something which is particularly complex, we might not want this shaded with edges type view. We might want to go to something like a wireframe view, which allows us more visibility of that particular component. So we have several options here within display style. We can also change the environment itself. So rather than being a very light environment, we can change that to be quite dark. There are lots of controls within here. We also can turn on or off the visibility of various things. So if you don't like the layout grid, which is shown to us by default, we can turn that on or off. And finally, we have the viewport. So if you want to look at multiple views of a component at one time, we can select this option, and it allows us to have different orientations of the component in each quadrant of the display, which is very useful, perhaps when you're creating some more complex features. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the preferences options that we have within Fusion 360. So we can access preferences by clicking on our name in the top right hand corner and going to preferences. And this allows us to set global preferences which apply across all of the Fusion 360 interface and also follow us between installs. So wherever you log in, you'll get these same preferences. The most useful to you are likely to be the pan, zoom and orbit shortcuts. So if you're used to a particular program, you can select that program and you can get the same shortcuts as you would use in that program. You might also have a preference for whether you want the y-axis or the z-axis to point towards the top of the model. Additionally to this, you may want to set specific options for when you create 2D engineering drawings. So by standard or by default, this is set to inherit everything from the design. For the drawings that I create ISO drawings, and I create these in third angle projection. So I need to set these options accordingly. Once I've got these correct, I can press apply, and every new drawing that I create will have these default options. There are also many other options for specific workspaces within Fusion 360. So if we want to set particular default options for, let's say, the render workspace, we have access to that here. The last major area, probably for this interface or for this preferences section, is your default units. So under default units and design, you can set millimeters, centimeters, meters, inch, feet, etc. And then all new designs created will use that default unit scheme. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I hope this has been useful, and I will see you in the next video.